As many South Africans lament the high levels of unemployment, many political parties have promised to have the solution to widespread joblessness. According to experts, a major hurdle to overcome on the journey to getting South Africans working is the collection of robust, empowering, actionable data. To expand on this, we're now joined by senior research specialist at the Human Sciences Research Council, Dr. Justin Visagie, and he joins us now via our video link. And Justin, I just want to say, I'm sure looking at all the manifestos which have been launched by the various political parties, all of them are highlighting the issues around creation of employment. But you say that, we can't speak about the creation of the employment if the data that we have really does not reflect the true nature of the problems we are facing as a society.
Well, as you know, it's election time. And it's easy for political parties to make a whole lot of promises about millions of jobs. I think if there's anything common in political manifestos, it's the promise of job creation. And yet talk is cheap if you don't have the robust data to actually measure and hold government to account in terms of local communities. And this is something that we're working really hard on at the HSRC with our partners, to try and develop a more robust evidence base, but a local evidence base, so that communities can know what's happening in terms of job creation in their particular areas.
And upon doing this research, what did you find that sort of alarmed you to the fact that, well, we really don't know the true nature of joblessness in the country?
So South Africa's statistical ecosystem has a lot of rich data about social and household factors, but when it comes to firms and the economy, it's a lot weaker, particularly when you try and zoom down into a more granular neighborhood level. So the project we're involved with is actually trying to mine administrative data sources, in this case tax records, through a partnership with the South African Revenue Services. And because of the sort of rich data, we're actually able to zoom in and see what's happening in eThekwini. And within eThekwini, for instance, we can zoom in to a particular area like the CBD or what's happening in Pinetown. And that goes for any municipality in the country. And so having that kind of rich evidence base, I think, is really crucial, because for political parties and ultimately the administrations which must deliver their mandates, they need that sort of evidence base if they're going to make progress. I can't help but thinking that these big numbers need to be broken down into bit by bit. We need to look across the country at every region, every community, and say which sectors, which firms have been creating jobs, and how do we support that further so that the economy can grow. It's little bits. The whole the sort of national puzzle is broken up by what's happening in each local community, and I think that that's part of the key. Is moving beyond the political rhetoric to actually delivering by government. Is we need to understand what's happening in every area, every place, and then start to respond to what we're seeing on the ground.
And what problems does a government come across if it doesn't have the correct data for the people it says that it is willing to serve?
Well, it's a real concern when the decisions and the policies that are getting made ultimately can come down to a lot of guesswork. We talk about evidence-based decision-making, but in order to have that evidence-based, data is absolutely key. And so, the program that we've been supporting as the HSRC, along with our partners, National Treasury in particular, their city support program, has been trying to actually empower municipalities. It's on the one hand, communities need that data for them to hold leaders to account, but municipal officials and other high-ranking decision makers also need the data, because how do they plan, how do they support growth if they don't actually have that flow of information? So, it's not as maybe sexy as some of these big projects that we like, that we hear promised about. But ultimately, getting our country working again isn't about one big initiative. It's about bit by bit in every place, every space, us maximizing the potential. And so getting better data flows is certainly a part of the solution. And we're really pleased to be able to contribute to this through the spatial tax data that we've produced, and viewers out there can actually go and explore the data themselves. If they just go and type in Google spatial tax data, there's an interactive portal for people to go and investigate the trends for their particular municipality.
And maybe let's take a step back, Dr. Justin, and one would ask, how did we get here where there was no really a true reflection of the data that the country should have, especially because, you know, there's always issues around service delivery?
Well, it obviously costs a lot of money on the one hand to try and collect quality data. But the world is changing, and this is an opportunity. We hear of terms like the fourth industrial revolution and big data. And essentially, in this new world, data is really a powerful and important tool. And more and more, there are flows of information, whether it's through people swiping their bank cards, or whether it's through you going to a hospital. You know, there's these records are being collected, and as the world digitizes, it actually becomes much more easier and cost effective to start to access these bits and pieces of information. So you don't actually have to go into the field anymore to survey hundreds and thousands and millions of people to get a representative sense of what's going on. If you tap into some of these existing records and flows of information, you can still learn a lot. And so we're really excited about the work we've been doing in the economic space, because as I've said before, we haven't had that granular spatial information about the geography of our economy. And through now tapping into tax records, we can start to do this for the first time. But it's not just tax data. You can imagine you can merge these things together with, say, for instance, people's enrolling in high education institutions. And then you can see, well, if someone studied a particular degree, can we match that with information about their employment, and you start to really develop a powerful database. So there are multiple flows of information that are automatically already happening in society because the world is digitizing, and government needs to get smarter, along with partnering with other organizations, so that it can tap into this as a resource to ultimately make better decisions based upon credible data, credible evidence base.
And how will this actually aid government? I mean, we're always speaking about job creation and the high unemployment rate in this country. How will this aid government in actually responding better to the needs of South Africans?
It's a really big question. And if I could solve the unemployment problem, then maybe I should be running for president. So, I mean, as I've tried to allude to, we want a quick fix, but I do think that part of the key is understanding the potential of every different place and space, and then supporting that potential. So what's happening in Sandton, for instance, is a very different set of opportunities than what can happen in Soweto. But both are really important to supporting our country and growing the economy. So getting down to actually what is the maximum opportunities that are happening, and understanding and mapping and seeing, well, actually we're seeing job creation, for instance, in small business. It could be in a lot of micro manufacturing or micro retail in Soweto. Well, then government, if it can access that sort of information, can start to then explore deeper as to how to further support it and grow it. But the solution won't be the same for every place and space. So that's why the importance of data and evidence, because ultimately the economy fits together in a very complex web of flows. And it's always changing too and evolving. But I think the solution ultimately is about every South African, in whatever way, small or big firm, small firm, they all have a role to play. And I think getting that better information base is sort of the foundation that can then start to make smarter policy decisions.
It's a very interesting conversation and research that you have conducted, Dr. Justin. That is Dr. Justin Visagie. He is Senior Researcher Specialist in Human Sciences Research Council. He's from the Human Sciences Research Council. They're just talking to us about the importance of accurate data, especially as government tries to answer problems and give solutions to the high unemployment rate.